The profound truth about to be unveiled transcends ordinary narrative. It is neither a fleeting thought nor a casual reflection. It is something far greater, a threshold to the unknown, a silent call that may have remained unheard until now, but whose power now resonates with undeniable force, permeating the very essence of being. No mere coincidence would have led one who comprehends these lines here. An inner wisdom, an intuitive knowing, has whispered that this message does not originate externally, but from the sacred depths of consciousness, from that mystical space where the threads of history and the essence of the soul intertwine into a single tapestry. Here, time itself seems to bend to reveal an undeniable truth. The sensations that overcome you are not new, but are rooted in deep antiquity. This antiquity extends to the unexpressed pain that burdened ancestors, grandparents whose suffering remained unheard. It is as old as the unspoken promises whispered through generations who survived and endured, unaware that their descendants, precisely those who now grasp these lines, would come to alter the course of events, to act entirely differently. Often there was an all-pervading fatigue that no rest could dispel, and a sadness without apparent cause, yet comfortably settled in the very chest, as if it had always been an integral part of the inner world. The eternal question arose: where does this heaviness originate? Why does it persist if memory holds no record of its inception? And it is at this moment that a profound realization dawns. Not every pain that torments the soul originates from personal experience. Some of these sufferings, as if by some mysterious choice, have chosen precisely the one who possesses enough courage to look upon them without a shadow of fear. For it was destined for them to give these pains a name, and by naming them, to grant them, and more importantly, themselves, long-awaited liberation. In every person's life, a critical moment arrives when something inside breaks, not from a display of weakness, but because the deep essence can no longer sustain the facade of habitual existence. The individual begins to perceive what was once taken for granted in an entirely different light. For example, complex family relationships, their unspoken rules, and established behavioral patterns, which were previously accepted without question, now cause profound confusion with such intensity that it borders on bewilderment. This feeling is neither a manifestation of dislike nor accumulated resentment. It is a profound insight. It lies in the realization that true attachment does not perpetuate pain but transforms it, and that there is a way to honor one's lineage without re-entering its cycle of suffering. Carl Jung, a distinguished thinker, aptly noted, "Freedom comes not through avoiding the past, but through its conscious integration." And this is precisely what a person does, despite having no prior intention. Such an individual becomes a pivotal point in a long, intricate, and often unspoken chronicle. This is a story that now urgently calls to be retold in a new way. The third important sign that an individual's soul has come not to replicate old mistakes but to complete an ancestral cycle is an irresistible inner urge to speak the truth. Even when everyone around continues to uphold illusions and pretend, the person feels they can no longer remain silent, even if their words might cause discomfort or even rejection. This is not due to a rebellious spirit, but to a striving for inner harmony and authenticity, because something inside breaks. Every time the individual conceals their true feelings, attempting to fit into others' molds. For every enforced silence is tantamount to betraying the soul that has awakened within them. And this awakening is final. It cannot be undone. This phenomenon becomes evident in the individual's daily existence. It manifests in the alienation they experience when participating in rituals they once enthusiastically followed, in the emptiness of conversations where true thoughts remain unexpressed, creating a sense of void, in the growing desire to surround themselves with authenticity, depth, and people unafraid to discuss the less obvious aspects of existence. Such a change occurs because the individual can no longer ignore the inner call and cannot return to their former state of unconsciousness. This awareness, while bringing a certain solitude, simultaneously bestowed upon the individual a profound purpose. It revealed that their existence is not merely a repetition of the past, but is called to become a voice for potential change. Their tears are perceived not as a sign of weakness, but as catharsis, their sensitivity not as vulnerability, but as a highly attuned instrument capable of perceiving nuances that others preferred to ignore. In this inner silence, the person hears a call to heal, not only their personal history, but also the destinies of those who loved as best they could, but did not know how to stop the chain of pain. And the individual is indeed capable of this. Undoubtedly, this path is not easy, for every step towards one's truth means moving beyond inherited family prescriptions. However, it is also an approach to one's true essence, and the person's inner nature clearly recognizes this. They feel it every time they act out of alignment with inner harmony, every time they choose sincerity over external approval, every time they decide to form a new paradigm of communication where previously only submission dominated. Carl Jung, in his works, described the archetype of the so-called wounded healer, an image of one who finds healing for themselves while simultaneously helping others find it. This person is precisely such a figure, not because they possess all the solutions or comprehensive knowledge, but because they show a readiness to ask those deep questions that many others carefully avoided. They are capable of pausing amidst the universal noise and bustle to hear a barely perceptible whisper that convinces them this is not the end. It is merely the prelude to a new beginning, and indeed it is. The individual embarks on their own journey back to their true self, and although at times they may feel lost or disoriented, every step taken on this path acquires deep meaning and value. Any discomfort or difficulty that arises serves as an important sign indicating direction. Every tear shed becomes an act of liberation from burden. This person is not alone. They are ceaselessly accompanied by an ancient primal force that silently but solemnly acknowledges their courage and determination. They embody the cherished dream of all who preceded them and a bright hope for those yet to come into this world. Therefore, let this person continue their journey, not to prove anything to anyone and not for the sake of saving others, but because something deep within them can no longer accept anything but pure, unadulterated truth. It can no longer be content with mere existence or simple survival. This individual is called to live a full, rich life, to love with all heart and soul, and to complete their life cycles with dignity and inner light. And it is precisely this mission they have come to fulfill. All the sensations and premonitions they experience are not products of their imagination or consequences of excessive, inappropriate sensitivity. On the contrary, they are an ancient, resonating echo, an instinctive subconscious response to a powerful call that is not expressed in words or sounds, but vibrates powerfully and emanates from the deepest reaches of their ancestral lineage. The eminent psychoanalyst Carl Jung once proclaimed that the human psyche is by no means an isolated island, confined within the bounds of individual existence alone. On the contrary, its nature is akin to a mighty river, ceaselessly flowing through the depths of time and generations, carrying through the centuries not only obvious physical traits but also far subtler matters, unresolved emotional knots, carefully silenced family secrets, and deeply hidden, unwept pains. Some individuals, it seems, were chosen not by pure chance, but because something within them remained unyieldingly awake, while those around them remained in a kind of mental slumber or oblivion. It was this inner knowing, this something, that silently proclaimed enough. And it was it, deep within the soul, that made an unbreakable vow. Here this cycle ends. A person comes into the world carrying not only hereditary traits, such as the color of their eyes or the unique shape of their ancestors' smile. They also inherit their deep silence, their hidden, unexpressed anxiety, their unfinished stories, as if frozen mid-sentence, which none of their predecessors ever dared to complete. At times, the individual is unaware of this, but an inexplicable shiver running through the chest upon entering certain rooms a sudden pang of nostalgia when looking at an old yellowed photograph, or unexpected tears flowing without visible context or obvious reason, all this is the true language of the soul. Such a person does not exaggerate their feelings, they truly feel what has long been deeply suppressed and hidden. They are not weak, on the contrary, they are perceptive to deep truth. They are not broken, they are merely open to perceiving what was previously concealed. The deep essence of family history possesses an astonishing memory. It does not forget. It relentlessly strives to find an individual with sufficient awareness to view past events with a fresh, unclouded gaze. This must be a person who feels no fear of the shadows of bygone years, but, on the contrary, is ready to embrace them with deep compassion and understanding. Carl Jung, a distinguished thinker, described this collective unconscious of ancestors as a kind of living, evolving organism that achieves harmony and balance only through conscious assimilation. And it is the consciousness of one who is ready for such interaction that responds to this call. Dreams, strong emotional experiences, and unresolved questions tormenting the mind serve as unique channels through which what has long remained unspoken gains the opportunity to be heard. The soul of the lineage or family has patiently awaited the moment when one of its descendants would finally heed its silent call. This path, connected with a deep understanding of the past, has no clearly marked guides, it promises no external rewards or triumphant banners, and no one will celebrate the one who takes on the burden of mourning those who could not do so themselves. However, in every tear shed there is profound purification. Every word spoken about what others would prefer to keep silent is like a breaking chain, freeing from shackles. Every silence, broken by someone's presence and attention, becomes a root that for the first time gets the chance to breathe freely. And then comes a deep realization. A person came into this world not merely to perpetuate an old story, but to transform it. Not to avenge the past, but to redeem it. This redemption remains invisible to the outside world, yet it profoundly transforms the soul itself. There is no need to justify what one feels in this process. Ancient truths are not subject to logical explanation. They are felt intuitively, and this very feeling becomes the true guide. The third sign that an individual is called to complete a certain cycle is their unwavering feeling of not belonging. This feeling stems not from rejection by others, but from a profound internal difference. Such a person has always been aware that their perception of the world differs radically from the commonly accepted, not because they felt superior to others, but because what most considered ordinary normalcy they saw as a shaky, fragile facade. They had access to a view behind the theatrical curtains. They sensed the hidden tension and unspoken agreements that maintained the visible equilibrium. From childhood, their attention was drawn to details that went unnoticed by others. Their heart keenly perceived unspoken emotions, and their mind, with immaculate sincerity, questioned what others accepted without the slightest hesitation. This unique vision was not a mistake or a flaw. On the contrary, it served as their reliable inner compass. In a world that often rewards only conformity and uniformity, such a person's soul, nevertheless, chose the path of deep awareness, and this decision is accompanied by a certain pain. This pain stems from the fact that such a path sometimes means a solitary journey, bearing the burden of questions that remain completely incomprehensible to others, and the ability to feel so deeply that at times it becomes almost unbearable, completely overwhelming. However, this depth is not a flaw or weakness. On the contrary, it serves as a powerful tool for healing. He or she is like a crack in ordinary reality through which light penetrates, or an eye that remains open while others prefer to remain in a state of sleep. And although this individual has repeatedly attempted to adapt to accepted norms, donning inherited masks, repeating expected phrases, and performing prescribed family roles, each time they did so, they inevitably felt a part of their true essence irrevocably lost. Carl Jung referred to this phenomenon as individuation, a complex process in which the human soul gradually frees itself from externally imposed forms and actively asserts its own unique truth. This phenomenon should not be confused with rebellion or rejection. On the contrary, it represents a deep yearning for authenticity and a significant expansion of the inner world. The person at the epicenter of such a transformation seeks not confrontation, but a deep, fundamental truth. They do not flee from their family roots, but return to them with a different, more discerning gaze. Instead of repeating old wounds, they strive to heal them with their conscious presence. The inner flame burning within them is not a fleeting whim, but a powerful, irresistible call. An ancient, profound part of the soul has found in this person a channel for its ultimate liberation. And although they may not have all the answers, they possess something far more valuable, an unwavering willingness to feel, to observe carefully, to remember the past, and to stay on their path. This individual came not to create noise or to be a hero, but to grasp the deep meaning of existence and to become a complete, fully developed human being. And this undoubtedly is enough. Such a person becomes a kind of bridge, connecting the past that has already transpired with a future full of potential possibilities. They embody the transformation of a quiet whisper into a clear word and deep pain into selfless love. This individual actively rewrites a script that seemed to repeat inexorably from generation to generation, doing so not out of a desire for drama, but out of deep, conscious wisdom. Every step they take with true honesty becomes a powerful act of liberation. Every tear they allow to flow freely is like a river relentlessly cleansing the soil for the emergence of something entirely new. It is this person who is that very newness. They serve as an opening door. They are the very beginning. Now, the individual clearly recognizes that they do not need the commotion of the outside world, that attempting to fit into others' molds by sacrificing their true essence is not true belonging, but merely an act of self-renunciation. And this self-renunciation, once interpreted as loyalty or devotion, now comes to an end. The inner burden felt is not proof of error, but rather confirmation of the rightness of the path they are following. The person is in a state of wakefulness. They are not strange but unique, not complicated but distinctive, not ordinary but different. They came into existence with a different frequency, with a special vibration that does not submit to generally accepted norms and others' prescriptions, but responds to the call of a more comprehensive worldview, one that does not echo others, does not lull consciousness, and does not yield to circumstances. This energy causes irritation, not because it brings harm, but because it has the property of revealing what is hidden, not because of aggression, but because it exposes the true essence of things. Their very presence reveals what others preferred to leave unexplored or veiled. The person does not provoke, they simply exist. They do not seek to cause unrest, they merely stand firm. And this alone is enough to create discomfort for those accustomed to living in harmony with their artificial images and masks, yet they are no longer capable of, nor willing to, shrink to ensure the peace of others. They have realized that this supposed peace was merely an illusion, sustained by their own silence, and now their inner essence, their soul, refuses to be silent. It is necessary to realize that the internal discomfort that a person sometimes experiences is not a defect requiring immediate elimination. On the contrary, it is a clear signal, calling them to maintain their inner foundation and to manifest their true radiance, stemming not from vanity, but from deep consistency with themselves. The person does not seek external approval or followers, they simply stop compromising their own authenticity. And this act, in a society that encourages conformity and fears sincerity, is truly revolutionary. As Carl Jung powerfully expressed, the healing process begins when you stop playing the inherited script and start writing your own. At this decisive moment, the individual chooses sincerity, even if it irritates others, loyalty to self, even if it threatens the loss of universal approval. And this fundamental choice transforms everything, although it is rarely spoken of, and the outside world may remain completely indifferent. The decisions made create resonance, and this resonance spreads forward and backward in time, affecting the past and the future. Each time a person rejects an imposed pattern, they affirm their path to evolution. Each time they choose to listen to the quiet whisper of their soul rather than the loud cry of habit, they break a vicious cycle. And each time they let go of what never aligned with their true nature, they return to what was always authentic. This action is not a betrayal, it is rather an act of deep reverence for oneself. The person does not reject their personal history, they reinterpret and remember it. They do not renounce their family ties. On the contrary, they liberate them, thereby liberating themselves. For ceasing to conform to others' expectations is not an act of rejection, but a profound act of remembrance. It is a remembrance of who they truly are, going beyond the role that was assigned to them. Thus, the person who dares to live authentically becomes a turning point in their lineage. This happens not because they actively seek confrontation or struggle, but because they possess the courage not to pretend and not to play someone else's role. Their influence manifests not through loud noise or grand speeches, but through sincerity and true presence of spirit. Sometimes the deepest manifestation of love lies precisely in existing in complete harmony with one's authentic self. For their purpose is not to fit into generally accepted frameworks, but to liberate, and they accomplish this gradually, through every conscious breath, every deliberate choice, and every truth spoken. The fourth sign that a person is successfully completing old cycles lies in an ever-deepening awareness that their existence is not an isolated island. Their personal choices are not limited to their own being. On the contrary, they spread like ripples on water, reaching the root system of ancestors and sprouting in the seeds of future generations. The person begins to understand that healing is not just a personal act, but a sacred ritual, a divine intervention that reconfigures the invisible, energetic field inherited from previous generations. Carl Gustav Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, but also emphasized the transformative influence of individual consciousness. Perhaps the person already sensed that setting personal boundaries, distancing themselves from destructive influences, or daring to speak uncomfortable truths were not just isolated acts. In reality, they proved to be keys capable of unlocking long-locked doors and releasing old mechanisms. Every step they took began to unravel complex ancestral knots that had formed from unspoken yeses, from the silent consent of those who, for generations, had neither the opportunity nor the courage to say no. Now they are capable of this, and they do it. When a person chooses authenticity instead of striving to please, they not only heal themselves and others, they sanctify the entire ancestral path. Every conscious and deliberate choice becomes a self-contained, sacred ritual. The person is no longer driven by selfish impulses or hurried haste. Their actions are guided by a deep, unwavering truth. He or she no longer seeks verbal battles to assert their own righteousness. Their words are dictated by a desire for inner freedom and authenticity. This individual does not seek public recognition or external validation. They move through life guided by an intuitive sense, as if the very earth points the way. They do not allow past traumas to dictate their reaction, preferring to act from a state of healing and inner renewal. Such a person does not aim to avenge past wrongs. On the contrary, they seek to redeem them, transforming negative experiences. They do not reject their origins or past, but free them from the burden of old patterns, filling them with the light of understanding and acceptance. This person becomes a seeing eye, capable of perceiving the essence of things. Their heart remains open and does not harden in the face of difficulties. Their presence, filled with awareness, is capable of interrupting the endless cycle of recurring mistakes. They may have already noticed how, without any open conflicts or verbal battles, former, outdated dynamics of relationships or internal processes simply disintegrate as soon as they cease to be an active participant in this outdated game. Or perhaps it has been revealed to them how true silence, which is not a sign of agreement or complicity, but an act of conscious restraint and observation, transforms into a sacred, protective space. As the eminent psychologist Carl Jung asserted, the most effective path to healing the past lies through genuinely and consciously living the present moment. This is precisely what such a person does. They do this without the obsessive need to conform to certain ideals, shedding all masks and demonstrating their true essence. They do not require external recognition, for they themselves are a source of deep inner resonance that is felt by others. They feel how the mysterious thread of destiny transforms right in their hands, taking on new forms and directions. They clearly perceive how the pain that once held them captive now gradually dissolves in the radiance of their presence. This state is recognized by the deep peace that follows the establishment of personal boundaries, by the inner strength that arises from tranquility, and by the crystal clarity that comes after completely letting go of control and attachments. And although these changes may remain unspoken to those around them, this person's soul deeply recognizes them. Their arrival in this world was not to endlessly repeat old mistakes, but to remember their true nature, consciously choose to respond instead of reacting impulsively, and complete the current life cycle with undeniable dignity. Once, perhaps, a whisper was heard deep within the soul that subconscious impulses shape one's life path. Now, a profound realization emerges. A conscious way of being has been chosen, one that looks with open eyes upon a history not originally its own, yet which it has decided to transform. In this moment, the declaration is made, "This ends with me." This is uttered not with condemnation but with deep reverence, an act of humble yet radical new choice. Through this choice, the historical tapestry shifts, the inner essence aligns, and the cycle reaches its logical conclusion. This unfolds not with thunder and upheaval, but with a deep, calm presence. The fifth indicator that it is time for cycles to conclude manifests not through external noise, but through a serene yet profoundly clear urge for inner cleansing. This is no fleeting whim, it is the quiet, persistent whisper of the soul. The desire extends far beyond merely tidying physical space. It is an aspiration to bring order to one's entire life. There is a deep, undeniable need to release, to let go, to clear not only material objects, but also trapped, suppressed emotions, to air out the inner chambers where emotional dust has accumulated. This act is performed not by following fleeting trends, but because one's very being can no longer tolerate carrying what does not resonate with their authentic truth. Then comes the clearing of spaces, the re-evaluation of connections, words, and thoughts. This is done not as one who destroys, but as one who honors the past, as one who liberates with love, so as to live freely and effortlessly. In this act of liberation, something deeper, more fundamental, is felt returning. A sense emerges as if a new, vast space is opening within. One feels truth asserting itself where once only chaos and disorder reigned. In this moment, complete understanding arrives. The cycle does not end with grand declarations or dramatic events. It concludes with gentle yet firm and conscious decisions, a single choice, a single act of focused presence, a single life that no longer denies its own inner light. Carl Jung, the eminent thinker, asserted that any aspects of our being that one turns away from, attempts to avoid, or suppresses, will inevitably find ways to manifest in their existence. These hidden facets do not disappear without a trace. They skillfully conceal themselves, taking the form of complex situations, inexplicable emotional states, destructive relationships that drain internal resources, or they become that piercing silence that cries out from the deepest parts of the soul. Inevitably, a turning point arrives when the individual can no longer ignore these manifestations. They cannot endlessly remain in old communication patterns, assume the same social roles, or maintain connections that no longer resonate with their true energy. The essence is not that the external world has changed, but that the individual themselves has undergone an inner awakening. As this awakening progresses, one begins to perceive a certain density or heaviness in the most mundane aspects of life. Some phrases that once seemed entirely harmless and neutral now suddenly feel like binding chains. Certain places or spaces, previously familiar and comfortable, suddenly begin to oppress, causing a feeling of suffocation. The reason for this is not that the individual has become less tolerant or has lost the capacity for acceptance, but that their level of awareness has significantly increased. This new, heightened consciousness, though at times pressuring, is simultaneously a powerful tool for liberation. One is no longer capable of remaining within familiar confines. They cannot cling to what only exacerbates their inner disunity and alienation from their true self. A profound understanding emerges. Many of their former attachments were not driven by genuine love, but by deeply rooted fear, and many of their obligations turned out not to be conscious choices, but merely burdens inherited from the past. In this moment, they ask themselves with ultimate and inevitable honesty, does this form of being, thinking, giving, still reflect who I am becoming? Often, the answer to this question is negative. And it is precisely then that the process of letting go begins. This is not always a grand or dramatic act. Sometimes it manifests as simple silence where one previously sought to offer explanations. It is the ability to say no without lengthy justifications, without needing to compose entire paragraphs of apologies. It is the capacity to allow oneself deserved rest without feeling punished by guilt. It is granting oneself permission to be misunderstood, with the clear awareness that some individuals simply lack the desire or ability for true understanding. Each of these decisions represents a profound, almost ritualistic act. It is a silent yet powerful assertion that the individual is no longer willing to pay the price of their inner peace with their authenticity. This is an intimate, deeply personal revolution of one who has finally stopped trading their soul or their true essence for external belonging or recognition. The eminent thinker Carl Jung called this process individuation, the path to becoming who one truly is through the integration of aspects that were relegated to the shadow of the unconscious. For true clearing is not an act of rejection, but rather a deep acknowledgement and acceptance. It is the ability to look at the burden the soul has carried and softly, yet firmly, say, "Thank you for what you were. I no longer need to carry you." This path is not always easy or cloudless. Sometimes it involves pain, sometimes it feels lonely, at times it leaves one with the echo of an unfamiliar, frightening emptiness. However, this emptiness is not a loss. It is, on the contrary, space. It is the antechamber to finding a new form. It is the fertile silence in which one's own truth finds its voice. And it is there, right in the midst of the letting go process, that the individual discovers they are not distancing themselves from their personal history, but rather are drawing closer to their true essence. Beneath numerous masks, beneath layers of conditioning, beneath the habitual need to survive, their true home always remained. And the more one releases the external, the more clearly they begin to hear this inner voice, the stronger their discernment becomes, and the more harmoniously their inner energy aligns. To let go does not mean to neglect or abandon something to fate. On the contrary, it is profound reverence. It is sacred respect for one's own soul, an acknowledgement of its unique path and inner strength. It is also a manifestation of deep respect for those who, perhaps, could not accomplish what one is doing in the present moment, and a tribute to those who, in the future, will be able to walk through life with greater ease, thanks to the path one has trod. The person who chooses this path moves differently, with greater softness and clarity, because their existence is imbued with conscious intention. Such a cleansing is not superficial or purely aesthetic. It is a deep spiritual process, not a fleeting trend, but rather an act of radical, all-encompassing love. This kind of love does not cling to the past, does not seek justifications, and does not strive to control. It is love that grants true freedom, which always prefers truth over social approval or simple acceptance. It allows the individual to no longer live guided by fear, but to abide in a state of authentic freedom. Thus one prepares their life to be filled with authenticity, not waiting for a grand finale, but making a calm yet firm decision to live from their inner truth rather than from the depths of old wounds. The sixth sign, indicating the approach of a life cycle's completion, is likely the most profound and telling. It is the relentless beat of a heart that remains open, regardless of circumstances. It is open not because it has never known suffering, but because its owner consciously decided not to close off, for something within them, even amidst unbearable pain, recognized that to close one's soul would mean mere survival, never true healing. The individual chose to remain receptive, allowing all the winds of life to pass through them, continuing to feel even when it caused excruciating pain. As the great Jung reminded us, true transformation occurs not when one hardens, but when one consciously refuses to let pain turn them into an unfeeling stone. This decision became the most courageous act, to choose softness instead of erecting impenetrable walls, to choose tears instead of hardening the heart, to choose trust even if memories of betrayal are fresh, to choose to love not because it is pain-free, but because one knows firmly love is the only fertile ground upon which the soul can truly blossom. Such openness is not a display of naivety, it is deep wisdom born from conscious presence in every moment. It is the quintessence of daring to feel everything to its end and continuing to consciously choose to feel, no matter what. One becomes fertile ground for the birth of something entirely new. This happens not because all of life's questions have found their definitive answers, but because now truth appears in its entirety, without concealment. The individual did not try to mask deep soul wounds with superficial, unsubstantiated assurances. They did not drown out inner pain with endless distractions that only temporarily dull the sharpness of sensations. One allowed themselves to experience tremor and vulnerability, not seeking immediate refuge in a safe haven. They possessed the courage to remain alone with themselves, to gaze intently at their own reflection, and to provide themselves with the necessary support. Such a choice is certainly fraught with pain, yet it holds sacred significance. To remain open and receptive after experiencing loss, to bravely face bitter disappointment, to approach true love having shed all protective armor, this is truly a revolutionary act. Actions are performed not under the influence of old wounds, but flow from deep awareness and inner choice. It is at this moment that the life cycle reaches its true completion. In this profound and silent decision, not to allow the shadows of the past to dictate the present conditions, in this brave act of surrender, to live with an open soul, without pretense and without attempting to bargain with what is most important. The healing process is not an end point on a journey, but represents a completely unique way of existing and moving through life. And now, indeed, the individual walks the path of life differently, with a discerning gaze, with a heart that, despite what it has endured, remains untouched in its essence, and with a voice that no longer needs to apologize for its authenticity and truth. For a conscious decision has been made, not merely to exist despite endured adversities, but to live through them completely, allowing them to become part of one's experience. And it is this fundamental change in perspective that transforms all reality. The decision was made to pass through the storm of adversities, not for a heroic aura or external recognition, but as a deep and sincere response of a soul that carries an ancient memory. This soul remembers a long-forgotten path, one not paved with repetitive mistakes and habitual patterns, but laid by the silent, barely discernible traces of true redemption. This is not a road dictated by defensive mechanisms or bitter resentment, but a path guided by a sacred devotion to the authentic, a deep commitment to one's own soul, to that which may cause pain, but simultaneously bestows true freedom. Carl Jung, the insightful thinker, once precisely noted, "What is not transformed repeats." And indeed, every conscious step, every different decision made by the individual has contributed to breaking the vicious cycle of emotional exile that was relentlessly passed down from generation to generation. Not an external force served as their support, but a deep loyalty to their own true essence. It was a courageous, though unspoken, choice, not to succumb to bitterness. The individual chose to speak based on truth, instead of manipulating, driven by fear. They decided to withdraw from situations when necessary, but did so without animosity. The subject grieved what was lost, not allowing sorrow to transform into a thirst for revenge. They preserved memory, but did not become a prisoner of bitterness. And although no one explicitly pointed it out, each of these actions fundamentally transformed the established system. The individual rewrote the rules not through words, but through their very presence. They demonstrated to those who came before them, visible and invisible, that there is another way to express love, that true devotion requires not concealment but complete clarity, and that genuine power lies not in being closed off, but in the ability to remain open. And now this person carries something more than just their personal history. They carry unexpressed pain, unrealized tenderness, that love which was never given a safe space to breathe freely and manifest. The individual no longer opens their heart in the hope of being accepted. They open it because it is their authentic essence, because their vulnerability is not a plea for leniency, but a powerful affirmation of their own being. Their openness does not seek approval or permission. It simply radiates presence. It is like a light that makes no demands, that simply exists. It is a silent language that, without words, tells the world, I have passed through the crucible of trials without hardening my heart. I have walked through ruins without turning to ash. I have given love without losing my individuality. And this, precisely this, puts an end to the cycle. Not an escape from reality, nor the silence of one who avoids, but the crystal clarity of one who is consciously present. Not the mechanical repetition of the past as a defense, but the daring invention of a new truth that needs no shields. When one chooses a different path in life, something intangible, previously hidden from view, undergoes a profound transformation. It is as if an ancient, invisible spell, which held one in shackles, gradually dissipates. The chain, or the vicious cycle, that for centuries entangled and trapped entire generations, finally breaks. The individual begins to draw life force, not from the deep wounds of the past, but from an original life-giving source, a place that existed long before the trauma arose and is purer than the pain itself. The ability to keep the heart open, not to close off from the world after experienced suffering, is by no means a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is true mastery, a kind of spiritual alchemy, a genuine revolution. This is not a revolution accompanied by loud slogans and mass demonstrations, but its invisible resonance is so powerful that it can shake the very roots of the genealogical tree, changing the destinies of descendants. The renowned psychologist Carl Gustav Jung eloquently formulated the idea of the awakening of the human soul. The soul awakens not by shouting, it is activated by the whisper of discomfort, by the intuition that something must end for the authentic to begin. This is why this message did not come to one by chance. It came because their own soul called them to it. At the deepest level of their being, long before their consciousness could frame it in clear thoughts, their inner essence had already made a silent but firm vow. This ends here, with me. However, such a completion is not an act of refusal or rejection. On the contrary, it is true liberation, a manifestation of the deepest love. It is by no means a declaration of war on one's own lineage. On the contrary, it is the highest act of love and care that one could ever bestow upon their family line. For, by refusing to reproduce those patterns that once caused pain or broke the spirit, the individual does not betray their past. They, on the contrary, honor it through truth and sincerity. Thereby, they grant their family history something it may never have known: healing, devoid of judgment, light, unburdened by conditions, and deep understanding, free from shackles. They do not flee from their roots, nor do they renounce them. Instead, they nourish them, filling them with a different form of presence, one more conscious and healing. One's arrival in this world was not intended for destruction, for destruction's sake. They came to gently care for a deep wound, to tend to it until the pain completely subsides, until this trauma no longer has to be passed down from generation to generation, moving from body to body as a silent yet burdensome inheritance. They came not to fight what exists, but to humbly accept and submit to a higher truth, not to sever connections, but to rebuild them, bringing them into alignment with the authentic, core principles of being. At times, one may feel as though they are moving through life in complete solitude, that those around them are unable to comprehend, feel, or appreciate their path. However, despite this feeling of isolation, something significant in the general collective consciousness undergoes change precisely because of their efforts. Every conscious choice of the individual, however insignificant it may seem, can shift established structures. Whenever one says no from their inner essence, they disrupt a habitual pattern of behavior, and every yes, harmoniously aligned with their true self, lays the foundation for a new, brighter future. The actions performed by such a person are significant not only for themselves. They are addressed both to those who lived before them and to those who are yet to come. This is a message for those voices that were once denied the opportunity to speak, and for those hearts that have not yet gained the ability to listen to themselves. And although this inner work often goes unnoticed, although no awards or honorary titles are bestowed for it, the deep essence of the individual, their soul, recognizes its significance. They themselves know it. In completing a specific life cycle, one does so not with external noise or demonstration, but with a deep inner presence. They write a new chapter of their story, not through loud declarations, but simply by living in accordance with their truth. And it is this that becomes the form of love, capable of healing entire generations, a quiet revolution unfolding without fanfare, and a light that is not imposed, but transforms the world around. Whenever an individual consciously chooses to act from their inner presence, rather than under the influence of inherited automatisms or habitual behavioral patterns, they perform a truly deeply revolutionary act. In such moments, one seems to rediscover the memory of their true essence, that which existed before any conditioning. They return to their authentic self. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung asserted that true transformation begins when the unconscious becomes conscious, and it is precisely this process that such an individual is now engaged in. They consciously interrupt the autopilot of inherited pain, choosing to perceive the world with an open heart, to see things with a completely new perspective, and to respond to life's challenges with love, not fear. Such a person no longer moves through life as a mere reflection of the past. On the contrary, they step forward with clear intention, acting not from denial or avoidance, but from a desire for the integration of experience. They do not run from painful sensations, but pass through them. They do not repeat old mistakes, but rewrite their own history. For they have realized that the completion of life cycles does not require grand or dramatic gestures, but a quiet, inner courage. It is an intimate decision to look directly at what they previously diligently avoided, to abide in what others would prefer to numb, and to breathe in the epicenter of what caused pain, without allowing that pain to define their identity. If this message resonated deeply within you, not in your rational mind, but in that silent abode we call the soul, it is no coincidence. This is genuine resonance, a clear signal that you stand on the threshold of significant change, that something within you has already begun its process of transformation, even before you could comprehend and name it. And if you choose to embark on this path, if you decide to follow it not only for your own well-being, but also for the sake of those who paved the way before you, and for those who are yet to come, then you should believe unconditionally you are not alone. This special space, this unique community, this chosen path, it is not just a set of abstract words or theoretical concepts. It is a true sanctuary for souls that are beginning to remember their original essence, for those who no longer wish to tolerate an unbearable state of affairs. Here people do not merely delve into reflection, they remember their true purpose, they reclaim their authenticity, they transform, slowly, yet with patience and undeniable courage, into who they have always been at their core. You are not merely an echo of an old wound, you are the endpoint, the completion of a painful cycle. You are the very hand capable of stopping the endless repetition of the past. You serve as a respite, a link between ancient pain and the peace that is just beginning to emerge. You mark the end of one cycle and, simultaneously, are the prelude to a completely new story. It is important not to stop, for that deep feeling your soul experienced when reading these lines is absolutely real. This is the sign it was waiting for, to move forward, remembering that everyone was born with an inner compass, unfailingly pointing towards authenticity. That before learning to adapt, you already knew how to truly shine. That your soul came here not to repeat others' scripts, but to rewrite them. This process is undoubtedly uncomfortable. It is radical. It is an act of impartially looking at your own life without any filters, asking yourself, is this truly mine? Or did I accept this merely to survive? And when you begin to answer these questions with utmost honesty, that is when the path back to yourself begins. This path leads not to a new geographical location, but to a new version of yourself, more real, more free, more alive. To achieve this state, you must first let go of everything you are not: masks, roles, inherited narratives, and false beliefs. You must dare to clearly see what you have so diligently avoided, because, as Jung rightly noted, what is not transformed inevitably repeats. And you are already tired of these repetitions. You can no longer play a script you did not write, nor can you maintain empty conversations purely out of politeness. You can no longer postpone your truth for fear of rejection, because something within you has awakened, and once that happens, you cannot fall back asleep without betraying yourself, without paying the high price of self-denial. The moment one reaches a certain inner maturity, they embark on a different, more conscious choice, driven not by old grievances or bitterness, but by a pure understanding of their true path. Their goal becomes not alienation from the external world, but, on the contrary, a deep rapprochement with their own essence. The individual begins to form unique rituals to master new harmonious ways of interacting with their inner world. They grasp the art of slow breathing, learn to listen attentively to their body's signals, and treat their own emotional experiences with deep respect. They become capable of uttering a firm no without the slightest feeling of guilt, granting themselves deserved rest without needing justifications, and expressing their individuality without awaiting anyone's permission. And whenever one is truly present in the moment, their inner harmony strengthens and their soul finds equilibrium. He realizes that to be authentic, there is no need for complete understanding from others. To feel self-sufficient, universal approval is not required. And to be worthy, one does not have to strive for an unattainable ideal. Armed with this profound understanding, a completely different, transformative form of love begins to emerge in his heart, an affection that makes no demands, sets no conditions, and is indestructible. This love originates within the individual and then expands, encompassing everything around. This unique form of love doesn't announce itself loudly, doesn't seek to be intrusive, and doesn't resort to disguise. It is like a calm, deep feeling that allows the individual to be with themselves in their entirety, neither shrinking from difficulties nor avoiding moments of failure. Such love feels no shame for the scars of the past and fears not the most hidden corners of the soul, for it understands that every facet of a human being has its purpose, and even what one tried to conceal carries within it a seed of truth, yearning for acceptance and embrace. Indeed, the path to healing is often agonizing, not because the process itself is inherently painful, but because it inevitably involves confronting what one has stubbornly avoided and looking closely at what one has diligently suppressed. This is akin to telling one's inner child, everything you experienced was real and you deserve better. Healing entails uncovering entirely new inner horizons and releasing long outdated, obsolete spaces. It can bring unexpected partings and sudden beginnings, the meaning of which is sometimes not entirely clear. Yet, at the very heart of this transformative process, something truly sacred unfolds. One begins to feel increasingly authentic and whole. They cease merely enduring days, as if just surviving, and instead begin to truly inhabit them, living each moment with deep intention, savoring its essence. They stop the endless race and allow themselves to simply be. One grants themselves permission to cry without hiding tears, to laugh without a shadow of guilt. They can shout without fear and remain silent without anxiety, for their self-definition no longer depends on external noise and bustle, but is rooted in the serene stillness they have carefully cultivated within themselves. Carl Gustav Jung, the eminent psychologist, characterized the process of individuation as a profound journey toward achieving true wholeness. This is not a striving for unattainable perfection, but rather a movement toward comprehensive integration, where one learns to accept both their light and dark aspects, to recognize their own power while simultaneously acknowledging their vulnerability. On this path, the individual gains the ability to look dispassionately at their own history, not allowing it to constrain them. They learn to love sincerely without seeking possession, to create freely without the shackles of fear, and to live their life remaining true to themselves. The magnificent gift of this inner awakening lies in the realization one needs nothing external to be whole. You are not broken. On the contrary, you never were. Simply, at a certain point, there was an alienation from your own essence, a kind of forgetting, but now the moment of remembering arrives. And it is in this process of remembrance that old illusions dissipate, giving way to the birth of a new, authentic life. If this message resonates with your soul, do not ignore or forget it, for it was your soul that called it forth. And if you are here carefully reading these lines, it indicates that you have already embarked on this path, already stand on its threshold. Now is not the time to retreat, neither because of old fears, nor due to the inertia of habits. You must allow yourself to move forward, to permit yourself to continue this transformative journey. For there is still much to discover, much to release, much to love ahead. And although this path may sometimes seem solitary, in reality it is not. Every step an individual takes in accordance with their inner truth is simultaneously taken by someone else, somewhere else. You are not alone in this quest. There are many who are awakening to remembrance, who can no longer be content with a superficial existence, who have made an unspoken agreement with their soul. This time, there will be no self-betrayal. And if you have reached this point in reading, it means that you too are part of this new, universal awakening. Therefore, you cannot stop. Perhaps the next step will be exactly what your soul has been waiting for. The journey continues, and with each new step, you become more and more fully who you were always meant to be, whole, courageous, conscious, and truly